We organized Disney Feature, the premier Walt Disney Animation Studio, and all of their remote workers earlier this year voted unanimously to join TAG. But there's a lot more work to do.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
All right, folks, you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. I am pre-taping this interview with Ben Spate of the Animation Guild for IATSE, the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees. They are renegotiating their contract with the AMPTP, and so I wanted to get them on the program to talk to us about what's going on. So, Ben, welcome to the program. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Jacob, and I'm a big fan of the Valley Labor Report, so I'm happy to be here to share the good news about our work with the Animation Guild.
Yeah, well, so before we talk about the Animation Guild and the contract that y'all are working on, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got, did you have any union family, or what made you want to, become a union organizer?
Yeah, I had to go back a couple generations to find my union roots, but I'm very proud of those roots. My grandfather was in the Granite Cutters Union in Elberton, Georgia, where he actually contracted silicosis and passed away at a young age, but was a steward there. And so I'm very proud of that. And other family were connected to unions in other parts of the world. But my family were mostly textile mill workers in Griffin, Georgia. And around the age of 18, I started reading labor notes and picked up the Troublemaker's Handbook and ended up at Valdosta State University, where I was a food service worker. Me and my roommate heard about the Harvard Living Wage Campaign and decided that a Southern state school in Deep South Georgia deserved a similar movement. So we started organizing our coworkers and later joined United Students Against Sweatshops. And that really started my life in the labor movement a long time ago. After that, I got a job at UPS and was a rank and file Teamster and steward. Later became an organizer there, organizing here in Georgia across many different crafts and industries. Later, after leaving the Teamsters Union, I was contacted by the Animation Guild to come on board and to organize animation workers throughout the United States. And since then, that has grown into organizing visual effects artists, production workers, as well as game developers.
Gotcha. And so that takes us to, the work that you're doing now. You are an organizer for the Animation Guild, and the Animation Guild is renegotiating their contract with AMPTP. Can you talk to us about this contract and who is, AMPTP? Who are the people that are represented by this contract? What are some maybe projects that folks might recognize that your members would work on, and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the AMPTP is the Studio Alliance, or the Producers Alliance of the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers. It's really a unique feature of the IATSE's negotiations and how they are able to negotiate industry-wide agreements, similar to the other Hollywood locals. And the Animation Guild has a long, proud history of membership engagement and mobilization around issues going back to the origins of the animation industry in Los Angeles and Southern California at Disney, and has grown since then into an over 6,000 member local that now has national jurisdiction throughout the United States under the IATSE to organize animation workers anywhere. And as we have seen, in the recent negotiations that the IATSE and the Hollywood locals, the 13 live action Hollywood locals, were able to negotiate, as well as the studio mechanics locals, the film industry workers represented by the IATSE throughout the United States, were able to reach an agreement with the AMPTP just a couple months ago. It was ratified by over 85% of the membership. And obviously that followed last year's strikes that largely Animation Guild members were not directly impacted by those strikes. During the COVID period, Animation continued. Profits and the streaming wars were in full swing. And Animation Guild members have been calling for change in the industry for quite some time. So what's happening this week? Today is day 3 of the negotiations with the AMPTP. There were, somewhere around 40 proposals that were made by the union, and less than 10 made by the companies. And we remain very far apart on those issues. The top priorities issues are setting up guardrails around artificial intelligence that may even exceed what has been negotiated previously, not only by the IA, but other unions as well. Also addressing the perennial concern of outsourcing of bargaining unit work from LA to other parts of the world.
Right. And so that is the AI and the outsourcing then is the primary thing that your members are concerned about. You feel like, generally, obviously, you're going to want at least cost of living adjustments and things like that for wages and benefits. And then presumably, you'll be trying to fight for no concessions on the retirement and healthcare and things like that. But generally,
Sure.
you feel like the package that y'all have negotiated there is generally something that most folks are satisfied with. There's just a lot of concern around these kind of unknowns.
Yeah, no, I'll just say that the negotiations committee that has been formed, the rank and file negotiations committee, is the largest it's ever been in TAG's history. And they came very prepared with comprehensive proposals that go well beyond those 2 top priorities. And so there are unique craft issues that exist within our membership for particular types of work, like storyboards and the Writers Craft Committee, amongst others, that have specific issues for them and their coworkers. But those AI and outsourcing remain at the top of the issues across all of our membership. And it really, LA is, for animation workers, is considered the gold standard around the world, because
Right.
a lot of what you mentioned defending against concessions, but the value of having an IATSE and Animation Guild contract for many of these workers is that the total compensation, when you look at their healthcare and pension benefits, is really something that provides them a path to a sustainable career that transcends individual productions and studios. So this healthcare, being a multi-employer and union co-administered plan, follows the worker between productions if they're laid off or go through periods of hiatus, that they can accrue over the lifetime of their career. And so it's not tied to a singular employer, which is a massive advantage that those workers have. So protecting that and the low premiums and high quality of healthcare is also obviously remains a big issue. But the members are engaged again more than they ever have before. The contract priority survey that was circulated going into these negotiations had an overwhelming majority of participation. That was the first time that's occurred. And this past Saturday, August 10th, we had the largest rally in Animation Guild's history, with thousands of animation workers and allies there at Local 80, a sister local in Burbank. And it was an incredible and inspiring event. But the work's not done. And if the contract's not, if the tentative agreements are not reached by the end of this week, negotiations will continue. And so will the fight to make sure that animation workers truly get what they deserve. And when you look at CEOs like Brian L. Roberts from Comcast, who is worth $1.8 billion and received 11% increase in compensation last year, or you look at David Zasloff at WB Discovery, these are executives that are doing quite well and continue to do well even as the industry is, engaging in layoffs and other kind of efforts to increase shareholder value at the expense of the quality of the art and animation workers. But that's why they have a seat at the table. That's why they're negotiating, and we're doing our part as organizers too to continue to increase leverage even amongst those that don't yet have a union in the animation industry, to make sure that everybody has a seat at the table that does the same work.
Right, right. Well, you mentioned that this committee, the rank and file bargaining committee, was the largest that it's ever been,
Yeah.
and that made me think that we are the reason that we're pre-taping today is that our labor council is doing a union summer school, and so we've got a bunch of different locals in
Cool.
the area that are bringing some new members or members that haven't done any organizing type stuff, and we're spending the Saturday. Doing some training, some Unions 101, some Stewards 101, grievance, practicing an introduction to organizing. And so just thinking along those kind of educational lines, can you explain to us how the bargaining committee is selected? I know that's pretty different from union to union, so I'd be interested in how that process played out in IATSE.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has evolved over the years, and it predates obviously my role with the Animation Guild and how that has changed. But essentially, it was an open call for volunteers to step up to serve in that capacity, and there has been multiple ways that people can be involved, including direct member mobilization and outreach efforts, and then preparing proposals and researching these corporate targets. So. I can't give you the exact number of people that are sitting on the negotiations committee because it's not directly my responsibility, but there are somewhere around 40 or 50 people, members that are involved in one level or another in participating in these negotiations at the table. But as evidenced by this past Saturday's rally, they go well beyond just participating in the mechanics of negotiations into actual internal organizing tactics, like phone banks and direct and one-on-ones, and building a wide layer of members that are involved in the process. So very encouraged by that. It is something that we also replicate in our organizing outside of LA. And in those places, we elect negotiations committees. We do the contract priority surveys. We make sure that the organizing model continues throughout the bargaining phase and beyond. Because organizing is never finished, and I'm proud to see those methods incorporated into the day-to-day work that the Animation Guild does.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Right, right. And so you talked about that the Animation Guild is, not content with just representing the animation workers that they do now, that there's power in numbers, obviously. That's kind of the driving logic of unions and unionism. And so can you just kind of spell that out? Like, why is it that you shouldn't be, for folks who are listening on the radio and just to kind of spell out the obvious, why is it that you can't just be satisfied with unionizing workers, animation workers at Amazon or at Disney or wherever else, and that it's important to organize as many animation workers in the industry as you can?
Yeah, I wish it was obvious to everybody, Jacob, but as I think the question kind of underscores is that maybe not. Maybe it's not as obvious to some who may have a view that the union's responsibility is exclusively to take care of those who are already members, and not to utilize resources for those that aren't members yet, to circle the wagons, and to continue to maintain labor peace versus initiating what they would see as unnecessary conflicts with employers. I wish that debate was over, but we got a long way to go with that. Certainly, I would say I'm proud to work for the Animation Guild and see their efforts to support animation workers anywhere, and that includes around the world, not just here. Our jurisdiction ends within the United States, but we've also has sponsored and inspired the growth of the Canadian Animation Guild, Local 938, which didn't exist only a few years ago, but is organizing workers under the IATSE throughout Canada, and it's headquartered in Vancouver. Only a few years ago, there were no animation studios throughout the United States that were organized. Now, TAG has organized studios in New York City, Austin, Texas, outside of Richmond, Virginia, and in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And that wasn't the case just a few years ago. We've also organized remote workers, and for a long time, the Animation Guild's contracts limited membership to those that resided within LA County. Sort of an archaic rule that was really encouraging, the growth of the industry in LA County, because it required people to work in person. But prior to and during the pandemic, the growth of those working throughout the United States for LA-based studios became a huge problem, as companies these same employers that employed TAG's members in LA were not contributing to a healthcare and pension plan for those workers that happen to live in another zip code or another state, nor were they paying them the union scale and wages, or giving them the job security protections that our members have. So fundamentally, it's about inequality, not as just a moral issue, but it's an issue of power. And whenever you have people doing the same work for no rights and less pay, it is a race to the bottom, and it's an incentive, a perverse incentive for employers to shift union work to those that they can exploit easier. And we are aggressively seeking to address that inequality, both for those that work for LA studios. In fact, later this month, we're having a forum for those remote workers who work for LA studios, and some of them happen to live in Alabama and other parts of the South. We organized Disney Feature, the premier Walt Disney Animation Studio, and all of their remote workers earlier this year voted unanimously to join TAG. But there's a lot more work to do. Here in Georgia, the entertainment and film tax credit has spawned animation studios. We've seen them in other states as well. And if somebody's listening that knows anybody that works for in the animation industry that's not a member of TAG, they can reach out to us at organize@tag839.org, and I'm happy to explain to them the process to form a union to get a seat at the table themselves.
There you go. There you go. Hopefully, it'd be great if you get a lead from this conversation. Let us know if you do.
Okay, I will.
So, what kind of projects would people recognize that you're the members who are represented by this contract have worked on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you've seen a feature animation or a full length feature film animation that is likely done by the members of the Animation Guild. Children's and TV series animation, also largely done by members of the Animation Guild. And the only exception to that are companies like Pixar up in Northern California, which are non-union. And a lot of the animation work itself is done by animation workers in other parts of the world. So a lot of the pre and post production work is done in Los Angeles. And overall, the membership has grown. And one big effort to grow our work and our presence in LA County has been to finally organize the production workers that work alongside artists. And for so long, the Animation Guild represented artists and technicians and writers, but not the production workers that actually helped keep the shows going. So at Nickelodeon, the one show is the Patrick Star Show, but at Nickelodeon, we organized the largest group of animation production workers to date. And they supported the campaign by a supermajority of over 80%, and ultimately got a contract. But you can think of studios like DreamWorks, Netflix, Disney TVA, Walt Disney Animation Studios, Nickelodeon, and independent studios like Shadow Machine, Titmouse, Bento Box. So those that are familiar with the animation industry might recognize some of those names. But it is a long list of individual productions. But you can pretty much assure yourself that if it was a feature animation or a TV series animation, if it's not Pixar, it was likely touched by members of the Animation Guild.
That's great. The VFX part of the movie industry and the film industry has been non-union for a long time, and that's starting to change, and I want to talk to you about that. But can you tell us first, just on background, how is it that in Hollywood, which has been, one of the most kind of heavily unionized industries in the country, there remained this completely non-union section in VFX. How did that happen?
Well, look, there was periods of successful organizing and representation of VFX workers. Prior to the Disney acquisition of Industrial Light and Magic (ILM), those that produced Star Wars, those workers were represented by the IETSE, and they were engaged in visual effects. When Disney came in, that representation ceased. And so that's just something to note. We can get into that history maybe another time. But there were other organizing efforts of visual effects workers throughout this period. The reality is that the growth of the VFX industry really occurred at a time where computer graphics and the technology was advancing very quickly. And the IETSE, didn't have the same strategic focus that it does now to organize visual effects workers. There was some efforts, but they didn't really get traction because the idea of building a union in the entertainment industry, people wanted it to start already at a fully mature level, like we're representing an entire industry all at once and negotiating with all the employers all at the same time, similar to what the editors and cinematographers and grips and electric and animation workers have. Well, the National Labor Relations Act doesn't facilitate sectoral organizing or bargaining very easily. It's something that obviously we have to organize enterprise by enterprise or studio by studio, and adopting an organizing methodology that actually ensures supermajority levels of support, worker-led campaigns led from the bottom up. Those are the kind of approaches that we've had to learn from other unions and adopt to the world of visual effects. So just in the last 11 months, the IETSE has organized and had 5 successful organizing campaigns involving hundreds of visual effects workers throughout North America. That includes Marvel, Disney. Just last week, Apple Plus. All 3 of those elections were unanimous. We organized Lightstorm, which are the avatar artists that work under James Cameron's company, Lightstorm, and DNEG across all the provinces in Canada. So we're on a roll now that we have adopted best practices and organizing methods. We're teaching VFX artists and production workers how to organize themselves and win. It's really moved. The VFX union movement has really evolved considerably from the Life of Pi controversy years ago, when they received the Oscars and then very soon closed and outsourced their work to other parts of the world, and that prompted hundreds of VFX artists to protest the Oscars at that time. But they weren't able to develop a plan to actually build a union from that. And so it's a good, important historical lesson of taking a movement from protest to power through applying a bottom-up organizing approach.
Right. I think that is that's a really interesting piece of history. What do you think it is that that has led the organizing in VFX to be more successful now than it has been later? Do you think part of it is the moment that we're in, or do you think it's primarily that there's always been an interest and a need to organize? It's just that finally people are kind of catching on to the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like the XY axis of the subjective and objective forces combining to create the right environment for workers to gain power. But ultimately, you're right. I mean, there's been a pent-up demand from VFX workers themselves to have a seat at the table, and particularly the on-set crews like Disney, Marvel, and Apple that I just mentioned. They literally work side by side with people that have union standards around safety and around overtime pay and around healthcare and pension benefits, that the closer they are to those standards, the more stark that inequality really is. That's why those elections are unanimous, have been unanimous. And also the tremendous leverage that the IATSE has over the same companies. We haven't seen aggressive anti-union campaigns from those employers. Knock on wood. The further that we get out from the sets and into the largest part of the VFX industry, which are VFX houses or vendors, that's where you really see the hyper exploitation occur, and it's difficult to organize there when the margins are far less than when you're talking about Disney or Marvel, and they're competing for shots. And so the reality is that collective bargaining, the advantage that the IATSE has is this deep history and legacy of negotiating industry-wide agreements. But we are also nimble enough and adaptable enough to address in the realities of other employers that are not in such high union density concentrated areas like Los Angeles County, to negotiate collective bargaining agreements that are appropriate to those employers and that are fundamentally driven by what the workers want and what they prioritize. So we've been able to get out of this kind of concept that everything has to look like what it was before, into much more of evolving our approach to address the demands of the workers and who they particularly work for. So I think that generally, though, like your own program reflects, and the growing awareness and consciousness of the labor movement and how it expands democracy where it's less experienced, which is in the workplace, and where we need democracy the most, which is in the economic realm of our lives, that there has been a generational shift around expectations on the job. And people are no longer in these creative professions, are no longer allowing their passion to be exploited. That it's not enough just to get a shot working on a Marvel production or an opportunity to work in animation. People know that, as the book says, work won't love you back. And they're insisting that they receive both dignity and respect and fair pay. So all of our organizing leads that we've been successful both in animation, visual effects, and games have come to the IATSE saying, we are starting to organize our coworkers. We want to know that you have our backs, help facilitate and support our process, but we're doing this. And that's certainly a good place for an organizer to be in versus somebody that is seeking to advocate for those workers to organize. They're doing it themselves. That doesn't mean that we're not identifying strategic organizing targets and pursuing them. It just means that there is a pent-up demand to organize across these different sectors.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so, bringing it back to your contract negotiations with the AMPTP to wrap this up, you mentioned that, if you don't have a TA by the end of the week, then you'll keep negotiating. And that kind of surprised me because, my experience with negotiations and my following negotiations with other folks, being in negotiations for only 1 week would be extraordinarily fast. And so are you expecting to, what kind of timeline do you think y'all are looking at for these negotiations being complete? And, we've seen a lot of strikes in Hollywood lately. I mean, do you have any idea? And I know that some of this you're not going to be able to talk about, so, just tell me if you can't talk about it. But, do you have any idea from the bargaining table if you feel like you're going to have to take some sort of job action before you can get the companies to agree to a good contract?
I'll just tell you that the work to assess members' willingness to engage in various forms of escalating collective action has been conducted by member activists and organizers for many, many months. So the rally that happened on Saturday was just a reflection of a moment, a snapshot of the levels of support and enthusiasm that members of the Animation Guild have to reach a fair agreement. And I'm very confident that they're willing to do whatever it takes to get that agreement. There hasn't been a strike authorization vote taken, so there's not a formal expression of that. But this is an incredibly determined body of members, and they are not satisfied with just mobilizing a minority group of the most vocal members, but are determined to apply the same organizing methodology of assessing all of their coworkers and one-on-one and multiple conversations and engaging in structure tests, all the things that we've learned and the language of the late Jay McAlevey that has spread across the labor movement has been taken up by the artists and the creative people that make up the Animation Guild. So they're certainly not going to just take a contract that is the status quo. They need to see and have earned the right to receive historic changes in this agreement, and have learned a lot of lessons from the last year and in previous years of entertainment workers taking a stand in their own respective fields. Right now, TAG members are inspired by SAG-AFTRA and their strike in the games industry. Again, raising the call around AI. And you saw last week before the rally, the entertainment unions came together, including the Teamsters and others, and issued a statement of solidarity for the Animation Guild. So, unions in this industry have demonstrated over and over again over recent years that the members are involved and engaged and are willing to stand up for themselves. So that is something that the AMPTP should consider very seriously. And that just because people happen to be artists doesn't mean that they're not also ready to fight for us, to maintain and improve their standard of living and ensure that all of their coworkers are treated as equals for doing the same work for the same company. So we shall see. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the studios to do the right thing, and TAG is ready to negotiate a fair agreement.
Right. Well, Ben, do you have anything else that you want to make sure that you tell our audience about before we let you go?
No, I'm thrilled to be here, and I know all your listeners are big supporters. If they weren't, they wouldn't be tuning in the Valley Labor Report. But we need to keep labor radio alive. We need to continue to spread the message about the work that's happening across our unions and this movement. And if you're listening, and if you haven't started to organize your coworkers, or you're looking for ways to be involved, you don't have to have a degree in labor organizing to be a great organizer. You just need empathy and respect for your coworkers and a determination to do what others haven't been able to do through patient, dedicated, hard work of reaching out to people that are in the same boat as you. So thank you for having me on, and happy to keep you posted. And thanks everybody for listening.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.